In the previous video, I spoke with you all about what is history, as well as the kinds of sources historians rely upon. I also mentioned that historians have to be careful when using sources, whether primary or secondary. So, let's look at what kind of analysis is needed when handling sources. When looking at any potential primary source, letter, painting, or song, there are a few questions you must ask. First, what kind of document is this? How you approach a source will undoubtedly change depending on whether it is a written, visual, or audio source. And even within these categories, there's quite a bit of variation. After all, knowing whether you're reading a letter written by an 18th century English merchant compared to, say, a proclamation issued by King George III is undoubtedly essential to being able to interpret your source properly. Second, who is the author? Knowing the author can tell you quite a bit about the source already. For example, let's say you're researching the Holocaust. Reading documents created by the German government in 1943 will undoubtedly provide a different perspective on the horrors of that period than reading a journal kept by a Polish Jew. Finally, ask yourself, why was this source produced and who is the audience? For example, someone keeping a private journal that they believe no one will ever read and whose audience is only themselves arguably has different motivations for writing a daily entry than Martin Luther King Jr. did in writing his very famous and very public letter from a Birmingham jail. The same care must be taken in reading secondary sources. Think back to what I said about history being made up of asking why things happened and what the consequences were. Historians will often arrive at different conclusions to these questions and interpret the past very differently. For example, historians continue to debate the origins of the First World War or the true nature of the scientific revolution and Enlightenment. Even the nature of the Holocaust and its perpetrators is hotly debated, as you will see in one of your assignments for a later unit. So, as you read any work of history, you must be aware that in most cases, the author will have a thesis or argument that is being put forward and then defended, a defense that should be based on a careful reading of available sources. This brings me to my last point, and a new term I want to introduce to you: historiography. Historiography is the study of how history has been written over time, a history of history, if you will. How historians write about the past today is in some cases dramatically different from how it was written 50 or 100 years ago. This occurs for a variety of reasons. People are often motivated to investigate the past for keys or solutions to present issues, and of course, as values change, so might what we even look for when we study history. For example, historians in the late 19th century rarely, if at all, studied the role of women in history, or the effects of human beings on the natural environment. At the same time, historians must be careful to avoid what is called presentism, or the tendency to interpret or judge the past solely in terms of present-day values or attitudes. One can hardly expect a resident of 17th century France or 19th century Russia to possess the same worldview as a 21st century American. That is not to say that any glance backwards must be through the lens of moral relativism, but that we should understand that, in the words of author L.P. Hartley, the past is a foreign country. They do things differently there.